Hi, my name is Sharady, and again, thank you very much for watching this edition of the Sharady Show. Now, since we've started the show, I usually have a guest on every episode, but we also intend just to have a bit of a conversation or reflection that we'll be undertaking as part of the show, where we reflect on some issues and look at what are the possible solutions to some of the issues that we have. As you probably would know, I have been for quite some time now involved in what I call economic empowerment of African and Afro descendants, both in the Australian context as well as in the diaspora broadly and in the continent. And I think that entrepreneurship and wealth creation should be at the center of our daily concerns, daily preoccupations, because economic power matters, both for individuals and communities and countries. The question I would like to submit today is in relation to why us people of African descent tend to rank lower on the socio-economic scale pretty much everywhere, whether that is in Africa, in the diaspora. A lot of Africans still grapple with the issue of poverty, and it is an essential question that I think isn't given as much emphasis, as much attention as it should. Until recently, we used to hear a lot about the Make Poverty History sort of campaign, which was something that was initiated from the West and was part of, I suppose, the UN structure to try to reduce poverty in the world. And it's still kind of happening, but even though we don't hear much about that, and we heard about it a lot of times when it comes to Africa, the African continent. And I think even when our leaders, both in the political realm and in other settings, talk about this, it doesn't quite look like people really have kind of a proper solution to this. It is obviously a complex issue, but I think we ought to be able to give it enough attention, not just on the political sphere, because politicians, unfortunately, in our countries, in many of our communities, are only interested in their own egoistic interests. Only a few of them really care about the welfare of the broader population. But community leadership is not just something that should be left to be taken care of by politicians. And God knows that we have quite a few bad ones. I think it's something that every African should kind of uh, try to deal with in their own specific area of interest, in their own space, in their own field of interest. And we need to ask ourselves the fundamental questions. Why, even though the African continent is pretty much, I think, the richest continent on earth in terms of natural resources, but African people continue to experience a lot of poverty. And beside that, African communities in the diaspora, whether it's in Europe, in America, in Australia, and many other places in so-called first world countries, we tend to rank lower on the social economic scale. And it is a question that has been on the top of my mind for quite some time. And I understand that if we're talking about ending poverty, we're talking about creating wealth, because the only thing that will end poverty is the creation of wealth. And there are different types of wealth. There's a natural wealth, and then there is man-made wealth. And when you look at how things happen on the global scale, the sort of man-made man-made wealth is more important than natural wealth, because what is happening today is that even though we've got the minerals, we've got the natural resources, we actually have to give that to Western countries that have to then process, develop, and they sell it back to us. They make more money. Take the example of cocoa in Ivory Coast and other countries in Africa, Ghana, and others. The money that is made by the people who are producing cocoa is very little compared to the money that is made by those who are processing and transforming the specific natural resource. Same thing for oil, same thing for minerals. So it shows that it is actually when we add the human capital into whatever natural wealth that we have that ends up creating the highest amount of wealth. And here's the question: why are we not creating enough wealth, even though we actually have natural wealth? It is, again, a complex question. I don't have the answers for this question, but I would like to invite you to a reflection that is based on 5 points. I think I read somewhere before that if you really want to understand the question, you have to ask why 5 times. So if Africans are always ranking lower on the socio-economic scale, if Africans are experiencing poverty in many communities, why is that the case? What is causing that? Let's start with the first question. We've already asked why poverty is happening, and we can then go down and ask, is it a problem of mindset? And I think, this is an answer that you hear a lot when I organize summits and I ask questions of this type. A lot of people say, well, it's probably an issue with our mindset. Some say it's an issue with leadership. Some say it has to do with many other causes, including the colonization and the exploitation, imperialism, and poor political leadership, all of that. There are many answers that are given. But I will start with some of the most common ones that I get to hear, especially, for example, in the diaspora context. And I want to know why could mindset be a problem to in explaining why we are poor, or while we remain on a how do I put it? Why we remain on a lower socio-economic scale. There is poverty in African continent in so many communities. There's poverty in America, in Black communities. It's undeniable. There's poverty not necessarily poverty in a country like Australia, but Africans would still rank a little lower on the socio-economic scale compared to other communities. Is it just a problem of mindset? Let's assume that it is a mindset. Why? And then that's the next why. Why is mindset a problem? And then you can go a little deeper to say, okay, perhaps it is related to collective leadership failure. Our leaders, whether it's in the African continent or the diaspora African communities, we have poor leadership. And then the next question would be, why do we have poor leadership? One of the answers to that could be it's about education and self-leadership, poor self-leadership skills, poor education, because societies are made of individuals. And if individuals are highly educated, they have good self-leadership, they will then be able to set up collective structures that will improve the exercise of leadership within their communities. And that will accelerate the development of wealth creation and minimize or reduce or even eliminate poverty. Let's assume that it is also kind of correct that it is limited education and poor self-leadership skills by African individuals that are explaining the poor leadership that we have on the collective, on the public level. Then we still ask why. Why is that happening? And then we can say perhaps, and this is me reflecting, everybody may have their answers. I could say there is a high degree of emotionality and limited rationality that is observed in many African communities, in my experience. So we're highly emotional, and even though we have, significant developed rational capacity, but in many of our decisions, in many of our interactions with others, our dealings with others, when it comes to community issues, we don't always act rationally. We tend to use our emotions and other considerations more so than rational and logical thinking. I've been in community settings for many years, and I been a leader of a community and participated in many forums to discuss advancing community. And I can certainly remember a lot of times where in many situations people were more emotional than rational. Perhaps that is also something that is explaining why we are where we are as Africans. But then even if we accept that is the case, and again, I'm not saying that is the exact reasons, but proposing some answers and trying to dive even deeper. If we use more of our emotions and less of our rational capacity, and that is why we're having a lot of issues, then why is that the case? And perhaps an answer to that could be that it could be part of our culture and our belief systems. Now, I know when we talk about culture, we often only talk about the positive side of cultures. It's very It's very rare that people speak of the negative or not so positive aspect of their culture, because culture is something that you ought to be really proud of. Even though obviously there are issues in cultures, because culture is a dynamic thing. It changes, and there are things in our culture that perhaps do not serve us anymore that we should abandon, and we should adopt new ways of thinking and new ways of behaving and interacting. And by the way, a lot of times when we talk about culture, uh, people tend to connect culture only with the aesthetic aspect of it, the dancing, the the attire, the food. We don't talk culture a lot of times, especially in the African context, about the way we think, the way we behave, the way we interact with each other, and all that sort of thing. So coming back to the question, if our culture and our belief systems are contributing to our poverty, why is that the case? And so I've sort of trying to go 5 levels down to the question of why Africans, whether it's in the continent or in the diaspora communities, we tend to rank lower on the socio-economic scale when you compare us as a people with the rest of the world. And now I'm going to try to go into a little more detail in explaining things. I believe that in order for us to create more wealth, we ought to be aware of what are the issues that are affecting us as individuals and as communities. If we are poor, just to put it simply, or if, I could say if we rank lower on the socio-economic scale, which is one nice way to put it, but if we are poor compared to many other communities, well, it certainly has to do with something with our mindset. It doesn't explain everything, but I see a mindset, a poverty mindset that many would connect with, because if you want to create wealth, you ought to be able to have a mindset that is adequate in terms of business, for example, in terms of entrepreneurship. And it's a good thing that today there is a global narrative around entrepreneurship and Africans are embracing it. And this is part of our work in the community at the moment within the African Australian context, where we're encouraging entrepreneurship. And we see that there's an issue of mindset, because there are barriers that people have in their own minds, and there are also barriers that exist in the society, and that require that people adopt a particular mindset in terms of how they address those barriers internally and externally. And take the example of an Indian person. Many of us who live in Australia will connect very well, but it's not just in Australia. Almost everywhere you see Indians, they are really making a lot of progress in terms of the economics. They tend to do well in business. They work together, and they achieve a lot economically. Now, a lot of Indian communities in India, for example, are poor, even poorer than some African communities. But you can see that there is something different when you compare how the Indians work to try to achieve wealth and how we Africans work for that same reason. So our mindset is certainly playing a role in order to make a change in this space. We need to be able to create a new mindset, to develop new mindset where from an individual, from a family level, from a community level, and up to a country level, people are more receptive to a number of things, and they are more open, and they are more forthcoming to create an environment where people can work together to create wealth. Because a lot of times you do need some sort of community support, because even if you have very good capacity in doing things, you can't do it on your own. You do need people. You need even people that you employ. You got to deal with them properly for them to be able to do the work that you want them to work, and give you the result that you want. If you take the example of another community such as the Jewish community, the Asians, the Middle Eastern community, many of these communities, they work together. They support each other. Something that is still a little bit difficult in African communities. I know it doesn't apply for all communities, but in general, in my observation, both in the diaspora as well as in the continent, we're struggling with that. And until we work together more, we are going to have a lot of difficulties creating as much wealth as we need in order to lift our communities, our people out of poverty. So mindset is very important. And the type of mindset that is needed is one that is basically a growth mindset, that looks at how we can empower ourselves and acquire that capacity to make things happen, rather than resign in some sort of fatalistic understanding of things, that that's how things are. It's not going to change. I see actually a change in this space, especially from young people. And I know, for example, in the African continent, young people are becoming more entrepreneurial. There's a lot of activities happening, and that is giving hope. And we ought to be able to continue to encourage that. And that's what we're trying to do here in our space as we live in the diaspora. We're trying to do that. And then at some stage, look at how the diaspora can work together with the entrepreneurs in the continent, the African entrepreneurs in the continent, just like the Chinese do, the Indians do, the Jewish do, the Italians and Greeks, and all these sort of communities that have migrated to other places and that have been quite successful in developing businesses. And then the second why was about our collective leadership. In order for us to have that right mindset that will enable us to work hard, work smart, work collaboratively, improve our business acumen, all that will come from the collective leadership that we need to encourage. And that is whoever is in some position of responsibility in any community, they ought to be able to be more open and encourage an environment where people can develop ideas, create things, initiate things, and have that entrepreneurial spirit and engage in activities, because entrepreneurship is about creating, initiating things that bring solutions, that offer value to the community. When I look at communities, for example, in the African context, in the African Australian context, a lot of our communities are still kind of focusing on cultural activities, entertainment, sports, spirituality, helping the disenfranchised, helping the people who need help in our communities. Now, all of these are really important things. They do need attention, but they shouldn't be just the only things that need attention. We should really increase our focus on entrepreneurship and wealth building, and do that from a collective leadership level, because there's personal leadership and then there's collective or people leadership. And when we try to educate ourselves on an individual level, we also need to make sure that on a collective level, our leaders, whatever position they have in any settings, are able to facilitate, to create an environment where entrepreneurship, whether it's commercial or social, is encouraged, that people are not sort of backbiting each other. I mean, you can't eliminate these things 100%, but you can actually reduce them considerably and create an environment where people can be more open to collaborate, to share ideas, and to see how together they can work and do more things and better things than this fragmented approach in a lot of things that is often coming from a position of egoistic and interest and jealousy and all these things. There's a lot of these things in our African communities, and this has to change. So that collective leadership is where we think we can, if more of our leaders understand these things and they put themselves to work to bring change in this space, then we can hope that, more and more of our people will individually achieve a level of understanding that will enable them to initiate things and to work with others in a team spirit to achieve success in everything they do. Because not everyone can be, and when I talk about entrepreneurship in this particular conversation, I don't mean just commercial entrepreneurship, commercial enterprise. I mean, I take entrepreneurship in its broadest sense. That is being able to initiate things that create value, things that have some noble outcome in terms of bringing solutions to any specific issues, because a business is nothing but a structure that helps to provide solutions to people and receive money in return. But the core of it is about providing solutions, and social enterprise as well is about providing solutions to social problems without our focus on making profits. but rather in creating impact. And while the business make profit while they're creating solutions, in the end, it's the same thing. So that collective leadership is very important. And then we go down to education and self-leadership skills, because I think when people are more educated and they have higher self-leadership skills, they are more likely to generate uh, good collective leadership settings and outcomes. So if you have a group of people who are highly educated, they're likely to put somebody who's also highly educated as their leader, and they are more likely to assist that leader to do the best job he can or she can to help everybody else who's involved in that leadership exercise to achieve the goals of whether it's the organization, the community, the business. But it's not always just about a high education from sort of an academic perspective. It also has to do with self-leadership and self-management, controlling our emotion, that emotional intelligence, and the ability to set goals, to pursue a vision, and to be consistent in what we do, and continue to strive for excellence. That is what I mean by self-leadership skills. So on an individual level, we work quite hard to develop that culture of excellence on a personal level, and then we also increase our education, because education is definitely very important. The more you are educated, the more things you know, and the better you are equipped to address challenges that come your way, and that is very critical. So it is very important that we look at how we are educating our young people, for example, besides what they get at school. What sort of self-leadership skills that are being inculcated on them by the parents, by the community, all of that sort of things. When you see how Jewish people, for example, educate their children, you see that they're trying to inculcate all the values that comes from their spiritual perspective. I know that not all Jews are uh, spiritual, but a lot of them are, and that helps them as a community to achieve a higher socio-economic state, sort of state of being. I mean, so we ought to be able to do more in this area of education. And education doesn't always happen at school. It can happen. Uh, it first start from home, and then it goes into what I call self-education, and then it can happen in other collective settings, whether it's at work, at church, or other religious congregations. And anywhere you bring people together, education happens, because people learn from other people as well. In fact, a lot of the things that are really valuable, we learn them from other people rather than learning at school. School, they teach us mostly about how to read, how to write, and some scientific facts. But they don't teach much about how to think, and they certainly don't provide us with enough sort of opportunities to experience work as it happens in the real world. But we can do that. We can get that from people in the society when we see our uncles, our aunties, our acquaintances achieve things, and we see how they do it, and we can learn from that, and learn how you actually get things done practically rather than the theoretical focus that is at the center of schooling and academic endeavors. Then the other thing was about emotionality and rationality. Yeah, I think that, and I think there are many people that have written on this before. Us as Africans and Black people, we tend to be quite emotional in many settings, especially when it comes to working together. I've witnessed that many times in my involvement with community, because I've always been involved in my community since I've been an adult uh, in various groups, in various settings. And when there are important issues, when it comes to making decisions and then remaining consistent in pursuing goals, paying the price for goals that we've set as a group, it's very difficult for us Africans in general to be able to do that. We can have a good conversation about, okay, we this is a problem we have in the community. We need to solve it, and to solve it, we need to do X, Y, Z. People will talk, but when it comes to actually doing the work, it's a different battle. I mean, a different kettle of fish. And when there are interests of individuals that clash, rather than look at what the best way to resolve that and minimize issues so that the organization or the community or the platform or whatever that is bringing us together can actually move forward, and we are not stopping it with our own personal fights and trying to achieve egoistic interest. That is a lot, and all of that comes from that emotionality, which I think is quite high. uh, and we need to work on that. So we need to be a little bit more rational, not just in talking, because when we speak, we display a high degree of rationality. There's no doubt about that. But when we actually act, we tend to be dominated by our emotions. And people would say, for example, we need to be united. But when you approach them to say, "Hey, we're doing this. Can we come and help?" They're not showing up. When you initiate something rather than people helping you, and there are some who will help, but others will just sort of look. They want to see you fail. They want to see you first go. If you fail, they say, "Oh, okay, he's failed." If you succeed, sometimes people will even want to pull you down, and that is a problem. So emotional intelligence, as they call it, but I usually don't want to use that term much, emotional intelligence. I'm using it because it sort of helps me to communicate with you as you are watching, but it's kind of just a proper use of our emotions, becoming more wise. Wisdom is very important as we deal with people, because that's how we convert whatever we know and how we feel into how we behave and interact with others to achieve a particular goal that helps both ourselves and others move forward and achieve success. So that is very important. But what is it causing that high level of emotionality in our society? Again, I'm not an expert, but I think it has to do with our culture as well. It has to do with our culture as well. Our culture and belief system have to do with this specific aspect of our behaviors. I think we need to do more, not just to understand that we can achieve more, we can do more, we can sort of use our intellect and our behaviors. Um, I mean, we can use our intellect and in ways that will help us to behave well, to put some intentionality into things. But from our traditional culture, we, I suppose what I'm trying to say is we perhaps we've been conditioned through our culture and belief to things that are not really helping us to work hard, smart, and collaboratively to create wealth for the betterment of our societies. I don't have much time to unpack all of this because we have limited time, but I just think we should look into our culture in its cognitive aspect, not the aesthetic aspect. The way we think, the way we behave, the way we interact with others, we relate to others, the way we, excuse me, we work together, especially when it comes to working together to achieve things. Um, I know we come from a collective mindset type of culture, but what I'm finding, for the so many years, 3 4 decades, 3 decades at least, that I've been so much involved in community settings, is that we are not actually utilizing that collective mindset for good, except when it's about entertainment, when it's about things like faith, and stuff like that. But when it comes to setting up goals, and collective goals, that is, and pursuing them, it's difficult, and we ought to be able to improve from that level. And if we want to change things, so is that we need to look at how we create a new culture of excellence that is still, I suppose, embedded in our, you know, African culture. And also, I need to clarify here that there's not one single African culture. Africa is a large place with so many countries. Even in one country, you find different type of cultural settings depending on ethnicity, and tribal considerations, and all that sort of thing. But there is some sort of a broad understanding of what African culture is, and I think we ought to be able to revisit some of those things that have contributed to our psyche as Africans, and see how we can, you know, amend things and change, because culture should be able to be adapted. I mean, we should adapt some of our cultural fundamentals to life as it is now, because a lot of the things we call culture have been developed through the years in contexts where life was very, very different in the old African societies, in the middle of a village, with limited, I mean, within specific settings in terms of the governance and politics. We're not, it's different from when we live in metropolitan, urban settings. Things are different, and we need to find ways of adapting some of our cultural beliefs, some of our belief systems to life in 21st century. Okay, so I've tried to expose a little bit of what has been in my mind for a little while, and I hope this has given you some things you can reflect on. We are beautiful people as Africans. We have beautiful cultures. We have a lot of things that we can contribute to the world, but we ought to be able to find ways of improving the way we think, the way we feel about things, the way we act, the way we interact with people, the way we work together to achieve goals. And then we can be kings again, because we're actually the beginning of civilizations. And we can actually regain that stage. When you look at our leaders, there are people who have achieved a lot of things in commercial space and in political space. We know how to create wealth, because the richest black man on earth right now is an African person, Nigerian, Dangote. We have other black successful people, Oprah and others. There's Africans as well, who know how to make money and be rich. And it doesn't mean, I mean, it shows that we have that capacity. Now we just need to find a way to extend that widely into the society, so that we can be a little richer. We need to also be able to identify what's standing in our way, some of our emotions, the way we behave, using more of our emotions and less of our logical and rational thinking, could also be a problem in this space. We may be afraid of things that we shouldn't be afraid of. We need to be more in control of our minds and be able to act on the basis of more logic and rational thought rather than our emotions. Not let ourselves down when we don't need to be left down, not getting angry when we don't need to, not getting so sad when we can lift ourselves up and move forward and make things happen. All of that has to do with obviously how we see ourselves. We are much bigger than what we may think of. We are really completely enough in so many ways, and we can be great in many areas if we want to. There is no doubt about that. And we just need to put in our thoughts and attention and a lot of education, to raise a new generation of Africans who are not only skilled but fully equipped to live and work and achieve things in this 21st century world. That education is not just academic, it must also be how we encourage people to self-educate, to develop a culture of excellence beyond what they learn from school, and then come together and create conversations and create initiatives where we encourage more excellence, we support others, we work together to achieve better outcome. That is all from me for now. I hope you've had the opportunity to reflect on some of these things. Until next time, you stay blessed, stay connected. On our next edition of the Clyde Sharady Show, we'll have a guest and we'll ask them questions about some of these things and also get them to show or to share with us what they do and how they have achieved success in what they are doing. Thank you very much and stay connected. Bye-bye.